You're listening to the Naturally Noelle Show, brought to you by Noelle's Naturals, all natural products that really work. And now, please welcome entrepreneur, wife, homeschooling mom of 4, and founder of the Noelle's Naturals brand of products, your host, Noelle Talley.
Well, hi friends. I'm so glad you're here with us today. I know I always say I'm excited about our guest. I really am. I just get so much out of this, and if for nothing else but just for my own enjoyment, I am really just having such a good time getting to know all these amazing people that I've gotten to interview so far on this podcast. I hope you're getting just as much out of this as I am, because every person I talk to, I end up just learning something and feeling encouraged and empowered, and that's exactly how I hope you feel. So today, our guest is my dear friend, Angela Sackett, and by the end of this conversation, you're going to feel like she's your dear friend too. She's just such a wonderful person. She is a wife, mama, home educator, speaker, author, photographer. She's just the whole package. She is also the host of the Everyday Welcome podcast and the voice behind everydaywelcome.com, a lifestyle recipe and devotional blog, and author of several ebooks and courses on food, hospitality, and living a vibrant life in Jesus. With great joy, she encourages women to open their hearts and minds to know God through His Word and open their lives to others, living as salt and light right where they are. She and her husband serve together where he is the director at Camp Bethel in Wise, Virginia. Together, they have 5 children who they have homeschooled, with only one left in the nest. So she has a lot of wisdom to share with you. I know you're going to love her. Here we go. Well, welcome, Angela. I'm so glad that we have finally figured out a way to make this work.
Yes, and yes. Thanks for having me.
What you don't know is that this has been quite an adventure getting to sit down. I mean, aside from just like our busy schedules and family and things like that, and just trying to make it work, I think this might be our 3rd time trying to record, and we've just had so many technical difficulties on your end and on my end. And we're just like, all right, the enemy is just trying to stop this, and we're just going to press forward and make it happen one way or another.
Yes. I'll work to get here, but we'll know it's for a good purpose, right?
Yes, for sure. So it's funny, we got to know each other really not having anything to do with what you're doing now. You were a birth photographer at the time, and when I met you, you came to my house for a consultation. I was pregnant with our first baby, and you were just so warm and inviting, and you brought me a cup of tea, and you came with such a presence of, I'm here for you. And that just made me feel so just cared for. And we had a great afternoon of talking about birth and motherhood, and I hired you. And over the next, few months, we kind of became friends and would text and chat. And then you were there for my first birth, and it was a long one.
It was a wonderful one. I still think, so now I have a daughter who's a midwife, and I still think your birth story was instrumental in that journey for her too. So how cool that God works it all around.
I know, because she was only 11 or 12 at the time, I think. She was young.
Little sprout.
But yeah, we had that birth is, I've had 4 births now, but that birth was I just felt so held and so supported by everyone in the room. And, my husband was just such a great coach and so supportive. And I remember you and Adam kind of singing the labor song together.
Yep.
Just that like slow, quiet, soft little hum. And it was 30 hours total. And I think you were with us for a solid 18 or 19 of those.
Wouldn't have traded it for anything. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful. And I'll post a couple images from that, because the way you captured it was also very beautiful. And you captured not just baby being born, but just those moments of, us becoming a family. And oh God, I'm going to get emotional now.
Me too. I might be crying on the other side of camera.
But that experience really kind of, I feel like, bonded us together. And that's such a special thing to share with anybody. And we really became friends over that. And over the years you've lived in various places and done various things, but we've always stayed connected and we've always kind of connected over good food. We're both foodies, and you kind of have a cool background with some of the cool things you've done in the culinary world, and now you're doing your ministry, Everyday Welcome, and your podcast, which
Yes.
I think is cool.
Loving it. Absolutely loving it. I love that we both connected over that too. The circles coming around, I guess.
Yes. So, today I really want to talk to you about just that idea of being welcoming and being hospitable, and finding ways as a mom to bring people into your space and to create just kind of a generous environment where people would feel like they could be welcomed into your presence. So let's kind of go in that direction. How do you think that that's a mindset that moms can start to get into?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because you and I, we talked about, we met through photography. One of the things that at that time, I had little ones. We have 5 kids. Our oldest is now 27. That makes me so old. And my youngest is 16. And I felt led during that time to start a Bible study for some of the moms who were my photography clients. And that, I don't know that was the first time that I really got to walk out that idea of what you say, creating a welcoming space really with your life. But I realized in order to do that, that was going to have to fit into who I was as a mama in that season and my kids that I had. And so we opened our doors. I think it might have been on a Friday morning, and my kids were downstairs. We had a 3-story townhouse, and they were downstairs, and their job was to play with the little kids that came. And I think that was a blessing for them as much as it was for us as moms to get together around the Bible and study and grow together. I think that was one of the first places, actually, even maybe before that, all the way back to college. Someone gave me a book by Edith Schaefer called Hidden Art, or I think it's been republished as The Hidden Art of Homemaking. But she talks about living that life of radical welcome and just giving what you have. I think there was a season that she talks about in that book of when she and her husband he was in seminary and they had nothing, and they just opened up what they had. They shared with a couple, 3 or 4 other couples, and would just give, what little bit God provided for them. They would turn around and say, here, we're going to share it with you. And I think maybe that was the first time, I think maybe, that I really had an eye-opening awareness of God gives us lavishly from himself, from who he is. And so he's given us the privilege to turn around and invite other people into our lives to share what he's given us. And that may not be material things. You and I actually it'll probably be up by the time this airs, maybe the interview that you came on my podcast and we talked a little bit about your move. But I loved hearing your story too of, going from a big, beautiful home to living smaller. And yet it's almost like your lives got bigger, in that process.
Yes. So yes. In so many ways. And I can't remember if I talked about this on our episode that we did together, but, and I know I've told you this personally, but I have some friends who are missionaries in Florida here. And one of the things that they do is they, help people that have come to this country that are displaced. And whether you agree or not with people coming into this country, there are people coming into this country who maybe don't have anywhere to go once they get here. And so there's a ministry opportunity there. And so that's what they do. They help them get jobs. They help them get their kids in school. They help them go to doctor's appointments. And a lot of these people are living in motels. Mm-hmm. And from their culture, you have to be hospitable. That's what they do. Yeah. And so they said, please come over for dinner. And they served them in this little tiny motel room with motel cutlery and bowls, whatever was in the cabinets, and made them these interesting cuisines from other countries. And I just remember hearing that. And it was right before we moved to this house. And I was feeling a little maybe embarrassed about the size of our home. And, it's not as grand as what we've had in the past. And I just really felt convicted over that. Like, who am I? We have so much compared to so many people. And who am I to decide what is good enough, if that's what God is calling us to bring people into our space and to let them see our ugly or our imperfect. Yeah. And that's actually something I would love to hear you speak to, because I think maybe that's where a lot of people are. My house isn't perfect. My kids, are messy. We've got a lot going on. There's laundry piled up. And I mean, I feel like that's an honest thing, because when you have a lot going on and you feel messy, you don't feel like you're able to bring people into that. How would you speak to that, Mom?
I think first and foremost, to recognize the way the Lord did hospitality, and that is where he was at the time. So at one place in scriptures, we hear the Son of Man had no place to lay his head. He didn't, I think, own his own home. He traveled with the disciples, but he ministered from where he was. And I think we're spoiled to death to have access, especially in the States, to all kinds of resources, home decor. And I live in a tiny little town in Wise, Virginia. I'll tell you more about that in a second. But we, even in the tiny little town that we're in, we still have a Marshall's with cute home decor, and I can still access Discovery Plus, where I can watch 1,000,001 home design shows. And we watch those things and we look at those things and we think, I have to have beautiful. I have to be a decorator. I have to be a cook. I have to have the perfect environment. Or I think we put that burden on ourselves personally too. I have to be an extrovert. I have to be a hostess personality. I have to be really mature as a Christian, whatever those things are. And actually we put limitations on ourselves. And so I think that's the first thing is that I can see, scripture tells us we are to be hospitable. We are to welcome strangers. We're to welcome one another in the body of Christ. But it doesn't say you have to be a perfect decorator. It doesn't say you have to be a great cook. And so I think maybe just taking the time first to pause and say, okay, God, if you're calling me to do this, what's that look like? Second, who's in my life that needs me to welcome them? For us, it's been different people in different seasons. But, for you, it might be the T-ball mom that you're out on the field with. It might be the teacher of one of your kids or the coach, something like that. Who's in my life that I might be a source of welcome to? And then what do I have to offer in this season right now? So for me, at one season, it was, I got kids. They can help babysit. Now I have my husband and I, so I'll say this, we moved almost 3 years ago now from the Jersey Shore to a tiny little coal mining town in Southwest Virginia. And we are resurrecting a camp that was founded in 1939 in the mountains. That's mostly log cabins and wild electrical outlets and exploding toilets, bats, you name it. But that's what we have in this season to offer. And God brought our daughter from the Philippines, where she was studying midwifery on the foreign mission field. She's now here serving with us at camp. And one of the ways that she comes alongside us, she's a resource for me. She's my baker. We opened a little coffee shop here. And, just using what you have in the moment. I live in a 3-room cabin that is maybe the size of my living room in my last house. But just being willing to say, this is what I have, come be a part of it, and not feeling like I have to become anything that I'm not. God's created you uniquely. If you're a mom with little ones in this season, that's right who you are and where you are supposed to be. And that's what he's going to use. If you are a college student, if you are a retired lady, I have a friend, mentor, precious friend. She's in her 80s and she lives in a retirement facility with all the old people, as she says. And she has a tiny little 1-room apartment. But one night a week, she opens up that apartment for movie night and she cooks dinner for 3 other ladies that live in the community. And she uses it as a relationship builder. And man, is she an example to me. I can barely get on her social calendar because she's ministering from right where she is.
So you threw out the introvert extrovert thing, which I think is a fair piece, because most people are very shocked to find out that I'm an introvert, but because I do love people, and when I'm with people, I give and I pour, and I want to have that deep connection with people. That's important to me, but I can only handle so much. And so for me, that's a lot. I'm not really a big people person. And so what are ways that we can serve if that's not really our disposition?
I love that you said that. Same, actually. I heard a phrase a few years ago: introverted extrovert, extroverted introvert,
or ambivert. Yep.
Yeah,
ambivert is kind of a thing.
Whatever it is, there are so many tools out there that are, personality tests or strengths finder or whatever. I think those can be great tools in helping us know ourselves and know how we can better prepare but we can never allow them to define us and limit us. Actually, just did a podcast on that recently about finding our identity. Our identity is child of the King. So what does that look like? I think for some of us, it might be that we need to build more time into our schedules. For me, camp life it's all people all the time. And I really, when we first moved here, so funny story, we didn't have a lock on our house for the first year and a half that we lived here. Didn't even have I didn't have a key. There was a lock, but it didn't work. We didn't have a key to it. And people were used to just coming and popping in. And I once got a text from a guest who had stayed at the camp who said, "Oh, by the way, I left our check on your kitchen counter." I'm like, "You what?" And I had to, I say wild hospitality that we're living here in the mountains, but I had to sort of build some boundaries around myself. We put a lock on our door. I, made it clear that I wasn't available 24/7. And you might have to do that in your season. Or if you have little ones, you might have to determine we don't go out during nap time, or we get ourselves home before bedtime because we have to preserve that. Maybe it means that you need a little bit more time to get yourself ready if you're going to go meet someone for coffee or whatever. I think, too, we can be creative in the roles that we take on. So early on, I had maybe 1 or 2 babies. The church that we were attending in Florida, there were 4 women who were best friends, and they did everything together. They were most famous for their garage sailing skills. If you needed something in the church, you'd let them know, and they would hunt for it every Saturday. But one thing I remember watching about them, they all had kids that were probably middle school age at the time. They hosted a lot of events at the church together. And I would go to those events and I would watch. Usually one of the women was kind of the host and the one that, worked the room. And the other 3 were almost always kind of behind the scenes, emptying the garbage, making sure that everyone had a cup, making sure that whatever, the details were happening. And I think they were just as much a part of hosting. They were just as much a part of practicing hospitality, but they didn't have the same role that some of us might assume. So maybe it's getting creative for you. Maybe you're a background person and you can come alongside someone else and combine your gifts. Maybe you're organized. I'm a horribly disorganized person naturally. And I have a good friend who's really organized, and she's my right-hand woman in camp ministry. Just kind of, she's the one coming along beside me going, "You really need to go home and be with your husband this afternoon. It's time for some quiet, or have you had a nap lately? Did you stop and take a shower?" But I can do what I do without her. So maybe that's your role is a little bit different. And asking, again, going back and asking the one who made you, what's that look like? How do you want me to practice this?
Mm-hmm. And I want to kind of dip into non-hospitality welcome, because that idea of welcome doesn't necessarily mean entertaining or cooking or feeding people or having people over. And I want to even maybe go into how we model this and show this to our children of being a person who is available, especially to our kids. I mean, I know that's such a big thing, with devices, and I can get sucked in on my device, not even just mindlessly scrolling, but just reading articles or researching for new products or, important things. But because I have it at my fingertips, I'm tempted to just be, whether it's listening to a podcast, I've got my earbuds in and my kid's like, "Mom, Mom, Mom." And I'm listening to a Bible podcast, I'm feeding my soul.
Doing something good. Yeah.
Yes. But how do we sort of have that posture of being available and open and welcoming within our homes and to our families?
Such a good question. I do think you're right. The device is so hard. I think one of the things that we can do is maybe being intentional about sort of planning our days. We have certain times when we're doing that. When my kids were little, I don't know who told me this. I'm sure there was some wise older mom, but we did not drop naps when most people drop naps. They get to that certain age and they seem like they don't want to nap anymore. And I held to those naps, but not just naps. We transitioned to a quiet time every day for an hour. At one point, we even had the baby gates that would go across the bedroom door. So the kids could still get me if they really needed me. I could see them and make sure they weren't in trouble. But that was kind of a non-negotiable, especially with homeschooling. Every day, 1 hour of quiet time. When they got a little older, it was an hour and a half. And that gave me that time too. If I needed to go take a nap, or if I just wanted to go read for a half an hour, or I needed to make a phone call. So planning our days, I think makes a big difference. I am not good at this, I will tell you, in this season, but having a parking spot for the phone that, for the block of my day, it's on that charger. My kids see that because we're modeling for them that self-control too. My 16-year-old just got a phone this Christmas. He's paying the monthly bills. Thank you. We are weirdos in this world, and I am proud of it.
We are too, man. We were talking to some people recently, and we told them that we are a video game free home. And they were just absolutely befuddled by that.
Yeah.
And they said, "But what about on their devices?" And we were like, "Oh, no, our children don't have devices."
What?
He said, "What do they do all day?"
I read years ago an article called The Power of Boredom. And this wise mom was talking about how our brains don't actually kick into creative mode until we get bored. And I held on to that. I don't know how, I don't know if there's a study out there that says that or what, but I believe in that. I believe we, as adults, we've lost that art of quiet, of space. And so I think that's a really big deal. Just having a place where your kids see you model. I had a friend actually a couple of years ago, she was talking about how she stopped using her phone to study the Bible. And she would intentionally get out her real Bible and hold it in her lap because she didn't want there to be any doubt in her kids' minds that she was spending time with the Lord. So I think that's a big deal. And maybe just having times during the day, I am going to check my email at this time of day after I've already spent some time with the Lord, or I'm going to check my text at this time of day after we've done X, Y, and Z, and sort of setting up our days to model those boundaries for our kids, but also I need them. In fact, it happened to me yesterday. I sat down to do some reading and journaling. And before I know it, I had been sitting there for an hour and a half just texting different people. And it starts great. I need to text her this verse. This will encourage her. I need to text her. I forgot to tell her I was praying for her. And the next thing you know, you've lost, a block of your day. So I think that's probably a big one. It's just kind of planning out what that looks like. Did I answer that question?
Yeah. Yes, you did. You did. Another thing too, I wanted to kind of touch on with modeling for our children. And this is something that my mom would always say is that you don't model a heart of service by serving your children. And that seems like an odd thing to say because we do want to serve them, but at some point they need to serve. They need to be the ones serving. If they're just, these little princes and princesses who are getting everything done for them all the time, you would think that would teach them to serve, and you would think that you're modeling by your own behavior, but it kind of works backwards. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, first of all, your mom is a wise woman. I 1,000% agree with her. I do think there's both. I've been convicted at seasons in my lives where it's easy for me to kind of make my kids into the servant. But I 1,000% agree with you. Our kids need to see themselves as valuable, functional members of our team as a family. And that takes training. One thing we used to do when we were having someone over for dinner, we would actually talk about, okay, this is who's coming tonight. Give them a little background information about that family or that person. And then we would say, what question do you want to ask them when they come? And we would give them that assignment. They were expected, and you don't just get to go to your room and hide because grown-ups are coming. You don't get to say, I'm shy, but you're a valuable part of this family that God has put together to be an impact on this world. And so what question are you going to ask them? How are you going to get to know them? Another thing that's really simple, even if you have little kids, offering someone a glass of water right when they come in the door. Maybe you want to offer them a soda. I don't know. You and I probably wouldn't, but what offer them?
Kombucha.
Yeah. I'll give you all the kombucha. I still haven't gotten my son to fall in love with kombucha, but I'm trying. Anyway, yes, just teaching them to offer someone the first thing. Even my 16-year-old does it. He's done it for years. When someone comes in, he'll say, would you like something to drink? Can I get you a cup of tea? Would you like a glass of water? Little things like manners. Oh my goodness. I think largely we have forgotten our manners, even as adults. Yes. Teaching your kids what it means to pass the salt and pepper. Teaching your kids how to hold a fork correctly. Those are little things that maybe they don't seem like hospitality, but they are. Teaching your kids to look someone in the eye when they ask you a question. And that's not even kind of, you talked about the difference between, I don't think you use these words, but hosting and hospitality. Hosting is kind of in my mind, and this is probably another Edith Schaefer thing that I first heard from her. Hosting says, here am I, look at me. Look at what I can do. Come into my environment that I've made that's so beautiful. And sometimes I think hosting, by that definition, can make someone actually feel less welcome, less seen and heard and known. Hospitality says, this is what I got, come in and share it. And even this is what I've got, come in and be a part of it. So sometimes that's allowing your guests. When we were working with college students primarily, and I had little kids, they would come over, sometimes 50 or more, into our little house that we were in at the time. And before they left, they would help do the dishes, or the girls would help change a diaper if it was needed, or they would hold my babies in their lap. So inviting them into your world, it's not even necessarily about impressing or entertaining someone, but just welcoming them to be a part of who you are and where you are. And when you do that, you really are loving that person. You really are having the opportunity to get to know each other for real.
Absolutely. So for our homeschool this year, have pared way down to almost nothing. And so we're doing math, and we're doing Bible, and we're doing manners. And that's kind of it. I mean, that doesn't mean our children don't learn other things. They absolutely do. And we will do a whole separate episode on unschooling at some point later in this season. But manners was something really big that I wanted to do this year. We went to the homeschool conference last year and heard Monica Irvin speak, and I will post a link to her website, but she does the Etiquette Factory. And a lot of what she teaches is about manners and etiquette, is being considerate of other people and being loving and showing Jesus to them.
Yes.
Things like walking with your eyes up, looking out because you're looking for opportunities to serve. Is there someone who needs help? Do I need to open a door for somebody? Is there someone holding heavy boxes that I could take for them? If you're looking down at your phone, you don't see those opportunities to serve. So being aware of your surroundings is being considerate of others. And there's so many other little things she does that are just beautiful pictures of us being the hands and feet of Jesus to people and being considerate. We were at the ice rink the other day. The boys do hockey, and these kids carry these massive bags of all their gear and everything. And I was walking through kind of a narrow aisle with the toddler and the stroller, and these teenage boys just like bumped their bags right into the stroller and didn't say excuse me, and didn't notice us, and didn't see that there was a woman with a child. They didn't care because nobody has taught them to be aware of their surroundings. So little things like that are ways that I'm trying to model for my kids, and they don't do it naturally. No. They're really selfish, and they're kind of little jerks. And so we have to.
Aren't we all, right? It's funny. I had a moment a couple of days ago. I was at Walmart with my son. He is working his first part-time job, real big guy job at an assisted living facility. And he's working in the kitchen from 7 a.m. to noon. Then he comes home and does school, and he goes to basketball practice. And he is loving it. First of all, he's having the opportunity to serve. He has his favorite resident, an older gentleman that he helps out, and he cooks. They let him cook, which is really cool. But I picked him up from work, and he needed to get home and get going, but I had a couple of errands I had to run. And so we went to Walmart, and he was being so gracious and patient with me. And we were walking out of the store, and an older lady was coming into the store. And it was the simplest thing. He turned to her with the cart, and he said, grabbed our bags out of the cart at the same moment. And he said, here, do you need a cart? And just telling you that story is making me tear up, because I thought that I didn't have to say to my 16-year-old boy, give that lady your cart. He did it, but that's because he's seen it modeled by his siblings. 2, we had to teach him that starting when he was little. And it's exactly what you said. I think it's rooted in really caring for people, really looking at other people and saying, this person was made in the image of God. This person needs to see his love. This person needs to feel seen, known, welcomed, valued. I think that's the biggest thing, is valuing other people. And you're right. We have to teach them that. And we have to model that too. It's very convicting. When I'm irritated because someone blocked my way, or how do I respond?
It is. And I can tend to be, I'm never rude to strangers. I'm never nasty to people behind a counter or rude to a waitress. I would just never do that. But I am a little short with my kids, and Lord knows my husband,
Yep.
I can be a little aggressive or a little just, move out of the way. You're in the way. And I can tend to be that way. And so that is definitely a very convicting for me, because I can say, hey, make sure you're kind to this stranger here. But
meanwhile, I'm raising my voice at you and irritated at you. And yeah.
Yes.
I just saw someone posted that they did a little special holiday meal for their kids and they set the table. And I think that's a good habit to get into. There's that balance of teaching our kids to serve, but also serving them sometimes, and making, maybe the family meal once a week is a sit down. We use cloth napkins in our house. We still do sometimes, but at least once a week, because I wanted them to feel what it feels like to have something be special and pretty. And
yes,
now I live in the mountains in a cabin and they call me extra, but the people that come over like it. So it's okay.
I was going to mention earlier, I have this friend who her house it's curated thrift. That's the style that I call it. And she has cloth napkins, and I was like, oh, where'd you get these? They're so cute. And she's like, I just picked them up at the thrift store. And she has all these just perfectly placed little pieces around her house, and everything is thrifted. And they don't have a huge budget. Her husband's in ministry, and but their house is so welcoming. They have a home group there, and I just always feel so invited there. And it's not full. Like it's very simple and very kind of minimal, but every single piece seems meaningful and cared for and selected, and not just a bunch of junk kind of thrown all over the place that she grabbed at Hobby Lobby. It's all like these special little pieces, and I love that. But she has cloth napkins, and it's like, it's just nice.
I love that. It's funny. You said something earlier I wanted to speak to you about looking up when you walk and talking to people. It made me think of where we are, the camp that we're at. We bring in high schoolers and college students, young adults, to work in the summer as our mission staff for our summer camps. And one of the things that we had to teach them was look up when you're walking. Never have your phone out when there are guests present, or when you're at the meal table in the dining hall during the meals, but be looking to make eye contact. And that led me to, you're talking about the cloth napkins and curating things. I think I mentioned this. We opened a little coffee shop here, and that's what we've had to do. We do not, the camp that we're serving at, it had shut down. It had gone through a time of hardship. And so we were literally resurrecting it. And we've been amazed at how the community has come around us, but we really did have to make do. There's a lot of shifting around. Oh, we need a table in this cabin. Where can we get it from? And it's been fun to have that challenge. I think that you can see that same adventure with your kids, with your family. What can we do? How can we get creative? Not even literally in making our home a place where people can come, but how can we get creative in looking for opportunities to connect with other people? Something as simple as we're at the park and we're going to strike up a conversation with that little kid that's by himself with his mom, or they're seeing you ask someone a question, or can I help you? Or a mom that's got, multiple kids. How can we come alongside and help her? I think what you're describing it's beautiful, because it's being creative, and it can be fun when we see it that way.
Yes. And also too, we haven't even touched on this, but the missional aspect of it. How are we going to share Christ with people if we are not inviting people into conversation with us and into community with us? And that's something that I have really, you mentioned like personality tests and things like that. And when I first kind of learned that I was an introvert, so much made sense. And I was like, oh yes. And I identified so deeply with that I kind of leaned really far into that. I was like, oh, I'm an introvert. I don't do people. I'll just let my husband be the chatty one, and he would talk to strangers, and I would just kind of sit there quietly. And over the last few years, especially as we moved into a new community and very much needed people, I really had to learn to put myself out there. But then also, how will I ever have a chance to maybe share the gospel with somebody if I haven't even learned their name? If it's this person that I see all the time. There's a little local restaurant that I go to for breakfast when I go into the office once a week in this downtown little area where we live, and I've learned all the waitresses' names. And no, I've not talked to them about Jesus, but one day, I may. One day I might have an opportunity to get into a conversation with them, if they share something with me that's going on in their life, and maybe I offer to pray for them, and we've had that little connection that I've already broken that barrier of just finding out someone's name. If there are people in your life that you see regularly, whether it's a cashier at your grocery store or a bank teller or whoever it is, just like do the basic, minimal entry effort of learning people's names that you see on a regular basis, because that alone is huge.
It is. I did an episode several months ago called Ask Good Questions. And that was really kind of the whole point. My parents moved here about a year ago. They were very happy in their community in Charlotte, North Carolina. They had a church that they absolutely loved. They've been best friends with the pastor and his wife for a decade, in a home that they loved, in a neighborhood that they loved. And they packed up everything and moved to come and serve with us at the camp that we're in. And my dad is the definition of extrovert. The man, could talk to a stranger at any time, at any place, and talk their ear off. My mom is a much quieter personality. And I think what you're describing, actually, if you have a quieter personality, that's a benefit in that kind of a situation, because you are the kind of person who can get better at listening, at giving space for someone to tell you who they are. And I think they had only been here 2 weeks, and they came back from the grocery store one day and they said, "Oh, we ran into so-and-so at the grocery." I'm like, "You've been here 2 weeks and you know people in town?" And they have been so intentional about really connecting with people, asking them questions. That's a huge skill to teach your kids, and for us to learn too, not just ask a question, but give space. And this is an area where I really need to grow. So I'm not saying I mastered it, but learning how to do that, to give people, draw them out, especially in a society where we talked about the devices earlier. We live digitally. We think we know somebody because we follow them on Instagram or we commented on their post on Facebook, whatever that is. But there is such a desperate need for real life, face-to-face connection. I'm actually working on a resource for churches right now, because my family and I, we've moved several times, and we've moved to different churches, either on staff or as lay people. And I noticed that most churches, either they're really good at the whole, we've got signs in the parking lot and we've got a coffee bar in the front of the lobby, or they're really good at fellowshipping amongst themselves. But most churches that we've attended, the people there do not know how to truly welcome someone. I've been in churches where I've gotten handed my fancy cup of coffee and then stood there awkwardly while they turned around and walked away. Or I've been at churches where you can tell that the people in that church are really close to one another, and they meet each other's needs, and they love each other, and they serve each other, but nobody noticed that we were there and had been there for a couple weeks. And so that's one of the things that I feel really strongly about, is we have to learn how to do that. How to people.
Yes.
How do you people, and how do you people well, no matter what season you're in, no matter what you feel your limitations are, or your weaknesses or your strengths. But if Jesus has called us to that, he will equip us if we ask him.
Yes. And I love too that you mentioned just something as simple as having your children have conversations with people at dinner. This was something my parents were so very intentional about. My dad taught me how to not appear to be an introvert. I don't think he realized that's what he was doing, or maybe, I don't know. He just drew us all out. He made us all talk to people. My mom made us talk to people. They made us ask questions. They made us have conversations with adults. We were expected to engage. We were expected to be a part of that. And what we learned was a skill that I feel like so many people don't have. And I'm not talking about chit chat, but yes, asking good questions. My dad would always say, instead of "what do you do?" when he met someone, he would say, "What do you like to do?" Just that little nuance.
I love that.
That's so different. And that really gets people, "Oh, what do you do?" "I'm a banker." Well, what do you like to do? "Oh, well," then they're passionate, and then they're actually going to open up and start sharing with you. And you might have something to connect on. Just those little things of, like you said, learning how to people. That's a lost art, it seems like these days in this digital world.
Well, and I want to encourage too, if you're listening and you've got little ones, don't allow yourself to put limitations on them either. A lot of times I remember the temptation to say, "Oh, she's tired. She hasn't had her snack. She's shy. She's still little." But I think, we homeschooled our kids too. And this is something that I learned from, again, a wise older mama early on. They're capable of so much more than we give them credit for. A lot of times, even in simple things like our Sunday school curriculum, we dumb it down. We think, oh, they can't grasp this. Oh, they're not able to look someone in the eye and shake their hand. They are. It might mean that you need to practice with them. And it's funny, when we lived in Florida, found out that our next door neighbor was an etiquette teacher. And she had not a good opinion of homeschoolers. And so we felt like we had our work cut out for us. But over time, we got to know her. My kids attended her etiquette class, and she would teach them something as basic as how to shake hands so that the web of your thumb meets the web of the thumb of the other person, or how close to stand to that person, or how to look in their eyes, as we were talking about earlier. I think it's really important to remember that our kids are capable of way more than we think they are. And this is a whole other conversation. I'm not talking about dumping them on their own with other people, but guiding them, walking them through, modeling for them, practicing with them, and then being patient. Sometimes it's embarrassing if you say hello to Mrs. So-and-so. You need to practice that at home first. But then, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable, waiting for them to do it and not badgering. I said, losing our temper with them, but just waiting. I know you can do it. We've practiced this. Mm-hmm. Encouraging them quietly, when you are at the dinner table, remember that question you were going to ask them and do it joyfully. We're excited about this. We want to know this about Miss Sarah today. I think expecting more of them than maybe the world does. And this is a whole big commentary, but I think we have so gotten it backwards to where now our kids are exposed to grown up concepts, sex in, movies, whatever, at such an early age, but we're not equipping them for the things they really are capable of. And this is not even really hospitality related, but talking about making them a valuable part of our family. They're able to fold socks when they're little. They're able to fold dish towels. They're able to dry the plates after dinner, starting with those things that are real life skills that eventually they're going to be able to use. When our daughter left for the Philippines, she was 19 years old, and she went, what we learned later, right before COVID hit, and got stuck for 3 years. It was supposed to be a year and a half. When she was there, the first thing that happened was they brought in a language coach who would come to their home, and she was the newest member of the house that she lived in at the time. So there were several other young women as students. And I can remember her telling me that she was going to bake something. I don't remember what it was, for the language coach who was coming to their home. And I thought, she's not even in her own home. She's not even really established a relationship yet with the other women in the house. But God has given her this ability to say, I'm going to create welcome wherever I am. One other quick thing, I think sometimes too, it's accepting welcome from someone else. So maybe you're not the one who's saying, come on over. Maybe you're the one who says, yes, I would love to come for tea at your house. Or yes, I would love to come. We can do that even with kids. And again, it goes back to, let's practice those things before we go. How do I ask where the restroom is? Or how do I say yes if I'm offered something?
Yes. And sometimes it may be awkward, but I feel like other people will kind of make excuses for my kids. If my kids are like, if I say, hey, open the door for this lady, or they'll say, oh, no, it's okay. And I'll say, no, I'm sorry. We're teaching our boys how to be gentlemen. Would you mind if he opens the door for you?
Yes, ma'am.
And they always are like, oh, or I'll say, no, please don't do that. Like he needs to do this. He knows what to do. Or sometimes, you might have to make someone stand there awkwardly and wait until your child apologizes. And I'll say, I'm so sorry. Would you mind if we just teach him this lesson really quick? Could you just be a part of this?
That's so good, Noelle. And you know what that does? You touched on this earlier. That may even open up the opportunity for, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb if you're parenting that way in public. Who knows what door to conversation you might have. And that's a whole other, the older I get, the more willing I am to say, Jesus loves you. That's why we did this. Just wanted you to know that even that parenting publicly gives you an opportunity for those really gospel driven conversations.
Yes. That's a whole different conversation.
There's a really great resource. I'm actually going to order it again because I've given it away, but Becky Pippert, she wrote maybe in the mid-90s a book called Out of the Salt Shaker. And I think since it's been revised and republished, but awesome resource. She also has a ton of videos on YouTube where she talks about how do you take an everyday conversation and turn it into a conversation that has eternal impact. Great, great, great resource.
I love that so much. This has really gone by really fast.
I want to be around your littles. I miss it.
I know. They're such a blessing. And our oldest is getting older, and we're having such great talks with him. He's 10 and he has such like a deep mind, and he wants to talk about these deep and theological concepts. And they're really all just getting to such a fun age where we're starting to see some of the fruit of these little things that we instilled in them when they were little toddlers. And now they're actually doing these things without being reminded. Levi opened the door for somebody without being asked the other day. And you know, you see those little things, and I'm sure you've seen it, like you were saying, with your daughter. You know, you see these little seeds that you planted when they were young start to fruit as they get older. And that's just a really exciting thing to see.
So sweet. I love it.
Thank you for being here today. I love you so much.
Thank you. I love you. This was so much fun. I can't wait to hear some of the feedback and just hear some of the stories of your listeners and how they are getting to put some of this into practice. It's really cool.
Yes, absolutely. And what is your Instagram?
Yes, Everyday Welcome at Everyday Welcome on Facebook and Instagram. And my podcast is everydaywelcome.com/podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Naturally Noelle Show, empowering you to live a more natural life, one step at a time.